Assassin's Creed Shadows approaches us quickly with a release later this week, so what better time than now to go through each of the 13 main games, share my thoughts, and rank them all at the end from worst to best as a sort of hype-building celebration of the exciting new entry. Before you get your pitchforks and hidden blades out, I'm not ranking this game at the bottom, I'm just going through each one in order. I will share my thoughts and I will shove them on a tier list to do a ranking at the end. That said, I don't know where to begin with Assassin's Creed 1. It's the game that started it all, the original. Stemming off as a spin-off of Prince of Persia before becoming its own massive entity, Assassin's Creed 1 is a serious adventure in the Middle East that introduces us to the world of assassins, Templars, Abstergo and the Animus. We meet Desmond Miles, Lucy Stillman, Altair ibn Lahad, Al-Mualim. I hope I said their names correct. It's a real powerhouse of a game from a thematic point of view. The game is beautiful, despite the 2007 graphics, and the gameplay is surprisingly mature for such an early 7th generation title. Assassin's Creed changed the game in terms of parkour, directly inspiring the movement systems of other massive games such as Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor and its sequel. It cannot be understated what a huge impact Assassin's Creed had when it released. But how does it hold up? Is it actually good? Well, in my opinion, it absolutely is. I replayed it fairly recently to get 100%. Yes, 100%, flags and all. If you know, you know. And while replaying it, I found the game to be such a breath of fresh air. Assassin's Creed has become so big over the years that stripping it back to the bare bones of the first game reminded me just how it got so big in the first place. It's a real treasure of the game. It's funny, I could actually list a handful of shortcomings on display in this game, and I will in a minute, but it's more of a testament to how great the core of the game is, because those shortcomings really don't matter. The story isn't the best in my eyes. It's a fairly standard betrayal narrative that you can see coming a mile off, but what makes it more exciting is the inclusion of the modern day aspect, and that's kind of what makes Assassin's Creed so unique, or at least it did at the time. I'm among the fans who loved Desmond and the whole modern day narrative while it was still present. I think the slow drip feed of lore through Desmond's segments make the slightly more predictable journey of Altair much more forgivable, and in a lot of ways more engaging. It didn't matter so much that you were just going to do the same 3 or 4 missions in a row, because soon you'll get to see Desmond and Lucy again. I don't know, it's hard to put into words, but the modern day element worked so well with the first game and really complemented the bulk of the rest of the game. However, narrative aside, there is an issue I already mentioned. You do have to repeat the same missions over and over and over and over again, and that's really my biggest problem with the game. I'm yet to play the director's cut, but I believe that fixes this problem. But basically each sequence is made up of the same DNA, pun intended. You investigate a new region of one of the 3 cities, you complete a couple of tasks, then you assassinate the target. The issue is the tasks are identical. There are 4 kinds of investigation, but 3 of them are more or less the same, and you have to do these ones rinsing and repeating every single time for all of the 9 sequences. There are eavesdropping missions where you sit on a bench and wait. There are pickpocketing missions where you slowly follow someone for 3 seconds and steal something. There are interrogation missions where you stand and wait, follow a target slowly, and then punch him 3 times, which is kind of a mix of the last 2, but still, not that exciting. And then there's the most interesting one, which involves doing a timed task for a fellow assassin. They are a lot better. You have to complete a handful of these in each district before assassinating the target of said sequence, and unfortunately it gets very old very fast. By the end of the 5th time doing it, I start to feel a bit fed up and want the game to get more exciting, but it doesn't. I'm not saying the game isn't good at all of this is very fun to actually do because the game is, for the most part, really well made. In fact, at no point does the game stop being fun. It's just that the excitement plateaus a bit and it becomes more and more evident that the game follows a very clinical structure. Mind you, there are amazing viewpoints to discover, fun battles to have, and over 400 flags to collect, which if you put on some music, get a map open on your phone and just sip a beer while zooming through, can be surprisingly therapeutic. I do not condone underage drinking, but based on my analytics, none of you lot are children anyway, or women, so that's fun to know. It's hard to really cover everything in this game without the video being over 5 hours long, and there's an entry coming up that's going to take up a good chunk of time of this video, so I don't want to really go on too much. There really is a lot to love in Assassin's Creed 1. It has some phenomenal ideas, some wonderful world designs, and great mechanics. It's just got a few major shortcomings that are hard to ignore, despite them not really affecting the fun level of the game. They're not fatal flaws, more so just a bit of a shame. The game could have been more, the game could have been more exciting, but because it's so good in the first place, it never stops being fun. With all that in mind, I'm giving Assassin's Creed 1 a B tier. It's a great game, and it started off one of my favourite game series of all time. It just doesn't do anything quite as amazing as some of the upcoming entries. Assassin's Creed 2 was the highly anticipated sequel to the first game. That's stating the obvious, really. My point is that people had high expectations for this game. The first sold well and people liked it, so could the second one deliver? Well, I think the world pretty much agrees that it did. Assassin's Creed 2 takes Desmond and Lucy away from Abstergo Industries and introduces higher stakes, deeper lore and a handful of new characters before throwing Desmond back into the Animus to live out the ventures of Ezio Auditore da Firenze. Wow, I need to put some commas into this script. This is where things go up a notch. Instead of witnessing a few key moments of assassination through the eyes of some bloke who, for some reason, doesn't have the right accent, this time we see Ezio, a real Italian man, grow. We see him live. This immediately makes such a big difference. You know, the narrative of Assassin's Creed 2 is infinitely better than the first, and Ezio being at the core of it is such a large reason for that being the case. Couple him with the thrilling story of the Auditore family being hanged for their allegiances, and you have a banger of a game. Oh, also, they took the gameplay and dialed it up to 11. More mission variety, proper side quests, sensible collectibles, only 100 feathers instead of 400 flags. Mind you, people only remember the feathers because Assassin's Creed 2 is more popular, and they complain about it, but real fans know the 100 feathers are a piece of piss. Additionally, the locations in this game were amazing. Florence and Venice as the main two cities were perfect choices and wonderfully realised in the game. They're a treat to just wander around, especially with the stunning soundtrack to go with it. In terms of combat, there are more weapons and enemy types. It's certainly more advanced, and the game encourages you to go out and try different missions, many of which combat focused, so you have a good chance to experience what it has to offer. Among the many great side activities are glyphs hidden in the world. Now, I want to talk about these. These 20 optional collectibles involve using eagle vision on notable landmarks in the open world and completing a little puzzle before getting some great exposition about Desmond's prior. These were a genius addition to the game, and I love them. They really bring the whole theme of the Animus together. This isn't a story being told in the past, this is a story of the past being told today through a machine. A hackable, breakable machine. I always thought those glyphs made the Animus stuff so much more believable and was a really fun way to experiment with that kind of storytelling device. So that's the good stuff. The missions, the side quests, the collectibles, the world, the characters, the fantastic story, the wonderful ending, the stunning music. Please don't click off the video, but I'm gonna give it B tier. I know that sounds weird because of everything I've just said, but let me explain. I think Assassin's Creed 2 is objectively good and a sensible continuation of the first game. However, I don't actually enjoy playing it. It's really silly because in theory it's a more advanced version of the first game, and this one has all the bells and whistles. It does everything right, but I can't help but just feel it's a bit off. I still like it a lot, and my opinion of it has changed a lot over the years, flip-flopping higher and lower on my list, but when all is said and done, there are better games in the series, and there are much, much worse. For me, Assassin's Creed 2 sits comfortably somewhere in the middle. It did so much for the series going forwards and could absolutely be named the start of so many amazing trends in other games too. I'm not denying the huge impact Assassin's Creed 2 had, and I'm also not denying it's a phenomenal follow-up to the first game. I just can't, in good faith, say that I love Assassin's Creed 2 or even think it's one of the best. There's a lot to love, but a lot of that for me is just plain good. Great even, but we're talking about such an excellent franchise that great doesn't quite cut it in the same way that excellent and phenomenal does with some of the other games. Anyway, I gave it a B. It's not like that's a bad score. I just know a lot of people say Assassin's Creed 2 is the best. So this is definitely going to be one of my less popular opinions, that's for sure. Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. S tier. Yeah, I'm sorry to spoil that one by saying it right off the bat, but Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, in my opinion, is more or less a perfect video game. In fact, screw the more or less thing, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood is a perfect game. It's a perfect spin-off continuation style thing, it's perfect as an evolution of the franchise, it's perfect as a captivating story, it is a perfect video game. I could go on using as many different synonyms of perfect as I could, you know, flawless, exquisite, quintessential, but I really need to explain why I think those things. Firstly, I have a lot of respect for Assassin's Creed 2, as I just explained, but if I could list off all the things that it was missing, then add them, I'd have Brotherhood. It ticks every possible box anyone could have thought of to improve and evolve the series. Chain attacks during combat? One of the best decisions the series ever made. Animus challenges? Amazing idea. Guilds, war machines, flashback missions, more weapons, more enemies, replayable missions, missions with optional objectives. This game has it all and I love it with all of my heart. Seriously. I mean, just on the first topic, one of the biggest issues I had with the first two games, which I didn't mention until now because I wanted to kind of save it for this bit, was that the combat can feel a bit sluggish. The attacks only land sometimes, countering all the time can feel a bit repetitive, but now with chaining combat? Chaining kills adds an extra level of fun to it. Not only is there more thought behind the combat, but it ramps up the scale. You know, you can now take on plenty of enemies and kill them all in seconds with this new functionality. It's a small thing in theory, but it makes a huge difference when actually playing the game. It also makes going back to the first two games a little tougher because it highlights how basic their combat really is. Not that this video is about comparing each game though, it's just, you know, I want to look at them on an individual basis. But when looking at Assassin's Creed 2 now, it's very difficult not to feel frustrated by the combat. Anyway, the Abstergo challenges were a great move too, offering environments to have combat, parkour and stealth challenges. Again, a small thing in the grand scheme of things, but it just makes the whole game feel more complete. Make it feel like a huge premium experience, you know? On top of that, the guilds each have their own set of challenges to complete. These are more like general gameplay challenges, you know, killing a certain number of enemies quickly, stealing X amount of money, synchronizing every viewpoint. It's a nice addition. I really like the guilds and how they have their own mini narrative with lots of missions to complete. When it comes to the missions though, this game doesn't give up. On top of the guild missions, you have some phenomenal story-driven flashback levels, which more or less just long cutscenes that you interact with a little bit, but it's fine. You play as young Ezio and you witness the failed love affair of him and Christina. It is a beautiful way of deepening Ezio's character and backstory while not being too disruptive to his current journey. These all being optional as well make for a good level of player choice. You know, if you want to experience this you can, but the overall story is pretty streamlined, so if you just want to blast through it, you can. You'd be silly to do that though, because you'd miss out on the excellent War Machines missions from Leonardo. I think you have to do one of them in the story, but the others, you don't want to miss them. As if the game wasn't already as good as it gets, you've got 4 War Machines to destroy, each with a unique gameplay gimmick at the end of the level. It wouldn't just be enough to destroy the machines, no, you have to use them on the enemy first. I love it so much, it's so creative, and it really shakes up the gameplay a lot. It makes every mission feel worth doing. You know, you don't do a mission and you think, oh good, I killed another person, let's move on. You do it because you know each war machine is going to be different. Each flashback mission is going to give you some valuable lore. You know, everything in Brotherhood feels like it was put there for a reason other than just to bulk the game out, which is an issue we're going to see down the line with this series. These War Machine missions, honestly, they're a wonderful addition to the game, and they really just add to the overall feel of Rome being a hustling and bustling city, and Leonardo kind of existing in the city, you know, not just, oh, he's there whenever we want to use him in the story. You know, he was a human. He was a real human. You can interact with him. He's got his own life going on in this world, and it's weird because it's just side quests, but they really do make it feel alive. You know, it's not the biggest open world, but my god, is it wonderfully filled. You know, not too many icons like a certain game we're going to talk about, but equally there's enough that it feels lived in. Speaking of missions, my god, there's more to talk about with missions. This is the first time Assassin's Creed had optional objectives. Oh my god, what a legendary move on Ubisoft's part here. Almost every mission has an optional objective, usually something like doing the objective in a certain time limit, not being detected, or not taking damage. Simple things like that just add to the fun of each mission. You know, if you don't do it, you can replay it. It gives you a reason to, or it gives you a reason to maybe make the game a bit harder for yourself if you're finding that it's getting too easy. I still, to this day, love sneaking into the castle without getting detected. That level is hard as nails, but I love it. Optional objectives would stay in the series for a while after starting here, and I personally miss them a lot. On top of all of this, Brotherhood isn't in the name for no reason. This game introduces yet another brilliant mechanic that would stay around for a little while in the form of assassin recruits you can rescue, recruit, use in battle and train up. My god, not only do I need to find commas, I need to find full stops. Calling them in for silent assassinations or just all-out battles is so useful, and it adds a lot of depth to some of the stealth sections, and I love it. On top of that, you can send them on missions to train them up and gain money. These take anywhere from 3 to 20 minutes, and they're a nice little extra thing to think about, again giving this game even more depth and grandeur. It's a ridiculous game, really. On top of all of that, you can buy buildings and rebuild Rome after removing Borgia influence by killing the captain of that region. This, again, makes Rome feel big, it makes it feel alive, and it makes Ezio feel powerful and important. It's so damn good. There's also a story in this game. How could I forget? Ezio's journey in Brotherhood and his battle against the Borgias is just phenomenal. I love when these games take real-life historical figures and play around with the bits of missing history, and Cesare is a perfect choice to do this with. Brotherhood is relentlessly engaging from a narrative standpoint, and I always find myself glued to the cutscenes and story whenever I replay it, which I've done a lot. I can't say that for many TV shows or other games I've watched or played 5 or 6 times, you know? I personally think it's a stronger story than Assassin's Creed 2, again, probably an unpopular opinion, but while 2 is all about Ezio discovering who he is and getting vengeance for his family, Brotherhood takes a slightly lighter approach to begin with, before hitting you in the face with an intense battle that would span many, many hours of gameplay until the explosive ending. It's paced wonderfully, slowly building up, never slowing down. What a fucking masterpiece. Oh yeah, there's a multiplayer for the first time in the series as well in this game. How could I forget that? I'm not really a big fan of multiplayer elements tacked onto games like this. You know, it is a single player open world experience at its core, and a small scale multiplayer component isn't really for me. But what I did play of it, it was pretty good. I enjoyed it. Yeah, it's not what I'm after, really, but you know, if I was after a multiplayer component, I think it was pretty serviceable. Like, I did enjoy my time with it, and since I'm not the target audience, I feel like that must mean it was pretty good. So yeah, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood is pretty much perfect. I would change absolutely nothing about it. It gets an S tier, but will it be the only one to get that rating? Will Brotherhood end up being my favourite game in the series? Who knows? I've said on this channel before which my favourite is, so, you know, spoilers if you've already seen that, but don't worry, the rest of this video is interesting. Is it this one though? Might not be, might be another one. Anyway, while you're here, since you've made it this far, it's time I did the obligatory ask for you to subscribe to my channel. I have a lot more videos in the works right now, both about Assassin's Creed, Rayman, Simpsons Hit and Run, lots of things. I'm working on lots of things. So now would be a good time to join me as I try and hit 5,000 subscribers. Thank you. Now back to the video. Assassin's Creed Revelations is like Brotherhood in that it is essentially a large expansion to Assassin's Creed 2 that introduces some new features, a new world and a fresh story. Where Brotherhood took what 2 did well and basically perfected it, Revelations took what Brotherhood did and threw in all the ideas that never made the cut the first time. 2 varying degrees of success. This entry, I promise, will be a lot shorter than Brotherhood's, simply because they're almost identical games in my eyes, and if I talk about each game for however long that one ends up being, this video won't be done by the time Shadows comes out, and that's my goal. The assassin recruits, the optional objectives, the side quests, city rebuilding, regions under enemy influence, you know, all of that returns, but some things are missing. There are fewer extra missions like the War Machines and Christina missions, but Revelations does do proper longer levels for all the assassin recruits, so I guess that's kind of a fair trade-off. However, it's the new elements to Revelations that I really want to talk about. The first thing is the story. Old Ezio is amazing. Such a great idea to show an aging assassin full of drive for knowledge rather than vengeance. It's a much more mature story that takes the player on a journey to discover assassin history. Finally seeing Altair as a proper character with a proper accent was nice too. His flashback missions are a wonderful addition. Istanbul, not Constantinople, was a great setting too, with some of the most beautiful visuals the series would ever have in my opinion. Just the world and story together makes for one of the most memorable Assassin's Creed games ever. But outside of that, we have some real juicy Desmond narrative. He's stuck in the Animus following the events of Brotherhood, which is actually something I forgot to talk about in the Brotherhood entry very quickly. The modern day story is great. Yeah, cool. So yeah, he's stuck in the Animus, and we have these sections where he meets Subject 16, the previous subject to use the Animus. It's a really cool way of expanding the lore around 16 and the Animus as a whole. Further to that, there are these first-person puzzle mission sections where you play as Desmond and you get some great backstory exposition on him and the Assassins versus Templar battle thing. You even get a bit of information on Lucy in the DLC, which is more of these levels. They're not actually very good to play, if I'm honest, but it's cool to see something different, and you know, I'm really glad Revelations did try a bunch of more wacky things. I could take them or leave them, to be honest. They're in place of the glyphs from 2 and Brotherhood, I guess, and you know, I do prefer the glyphs. Again, another thing I forgot about Brotherhood, the glyphs were in it again, and they were just as good. Revelations also has a tower defense game. Yeah, it's a shame, really. It's mostly optional, but it's just not really good, and it lets the game down a little bit, because, you know, even the optional stuff in Brotherhood was pretty much perfect. There are a lot of ideas thrown in here that just don't quite work. You know, I respect the game for being more bold, but Brotherhood definitely got the right idea with what it kept and what it didn't. That said, bomb crafting is excellent, and it's the highlight of Revelations for me, and I wish it stayed in the series. I don't know if this is even a popular feature. I mean, I'm guessing people didn't like it at the time because they never did it again. But you can craft bombs for distraction, smoke, damage. You can customize the size of the explosion, the loudness, the threat. You need to collect all the relevant ingredients to do this though, but that's easy enough. I loved bomb crafting, and the little missions that came with them were straight out of Brotherhood. I loved it. It was such a good way of giving the player more option with how they go into a battle or they go into a stealth area. There's so much to love in Revelations, some amazing sequences and battles, wonderful areas to parkour around, one of the strongest stories in the series, great collectibles, fun Altair moments, and I really do love Revelations. I kind of see that and Brotherhood almost as one big game, but realistically Brotherhood is a bit better and they are two separate games. So I'm saying this through gritted teeth because I can't give every game an S tier, and spoiler alert, Brotherhood isn't the only one that gets an S tier, but Revelations this time will have to get an A tier. A high A, but an A nonetheless. God, I love these two. But does the series go uphill or downhill from here though? That's the question. Assassin's Creed 3 was huge when it came out. This was considered the next big sequel after Assassin's Creed 2. If you thought Brotherhood and Revelations were good, well look out because they were just spin-offs. The next game is going to blow you out of the water. I mean, that's what people were saying. Of course, Brotherhood and Revelations are as important as every other entry. But my point is, the expectations for Assassin's Creed 3 were huge. The early trailers of faked gameplay looked awesome. The new setting was interesting, the new assassin was a bold change. It had everything going for it. Smosh even made a song for the game, that's how you know it was going to be big. So what went wrong? I'm saying this because it's a widely agreed upon fact that Assassin's Creed 3 was a letdown. Everyone agrees it was just lacking the magic the other games had. It wasn't as fun. It wasn't what Assassin's Creed should have been. It didn't meet the hype expectations and was the beginning of the end for the series. Obviously everyone is profoundly wrong, but let's not be mistaken here. Assassin's Creed 3 is a phenomenal game and right up there as one of the better Assassin's Creeds. I don't know if it's because people had high expectations or they just grew too attached to Ezio or they didn't like the ending, but for some reason AC3 was under some extremely unfair scrutiny in a way I don't think any other title had. You might think later entries in this list got a lot of negative press, but really it was warranted. I think the Assassin's Creed 3 hate is really not warranted. I truly don't know what game everyone else was playing because to me Assassin's Creed 3 is one of the best experiences I've ever had with a game. Kicking right off, and I suppose a large part of why this game had such big hopes surrounding it, they revamped the parkour and the combat. A lot. Combat is now a lot more fluid. The idea of countering and counter-killing is still prominent, but different enemy types and different counter moves are now there, with nice additions like human shields to account for the new guns enemies will have. Oh, also, you can use the guns. And a bow and arrow. And a rope dart. On top of that, AC3 has a lot of new weapons, and therefore fighting styles. Obviously we all used the tomahawk, but there were options if you really wanted, swords were still there. The combat works, it's a lot of fun. It may be a little easier than before, but I'd argue it's more fun to take down hordes of enemies with, and it certainly looks a lot cooler. You feel like more of a warrior this way. But it's not just the combat that got a revamp, parkour did as well. Now, it's a little simpler, but again, for good reason. Connor feels a lot slicker to control than Ezio and Altair did. It's an interesting change and a fairly big one, but I like it. You still have to think about where you're going to climb, which was always an important part of Assassin's Creed's identity. Something missing from certain new entries. But of course, it's not just combat and parkour that's new. You have a new protagonist, Connor Kenway, or called something else, but I'm not going to be silly about this. This is close as I can get. A Native American with a vengeance for a thirst for blood. That's what he is. What a setup, honestly. The plot twist 3 sequences in was phenomenal and I loved it. It might be 2 sequences in, you get the point. The game does start a bit slow and it slows down even more after the twist to introduce you properly to Connor, but that's fine. It gets back to the juice of the game quick enough. Plus, it never really stops being fun, it just slows down a bit. I personally like Connor a lot. I used to think he was a bit wooden when I was younger, but really he's a very layered character with a hell of a journey ahead of him. Again, following a protagonist from birth to the most intense moments of their lives works so well, and I really grew to love Connor throughout my time with him. He may not have been as charming as Ezio, but what he lacked in charm he made up for with raw beast energy. Connor is tough as nails and not to be messed with. He's cool. He's what I see as a natural evolution of the assassin. Ezio and Altair had a lot of similarities, and it was time to shake it up a bit, and I think going this way was the right thing to do. Anyway, the new setting. New York and Boston were so good, but the real gem for me was the frontier and the homestead. During your time in the homestead, you can do various missions for the residents, and while that may seem a bit silly and a bit trivial sometimes, they make the area feel alive. If you hadn't guessed by now, that's something that's quite important to me. I love walking around the homestead and seeing each character go about their business, just living, essentially. I love base areas in games like this, and the homestead is a great one of the best even. Part of the homestead is a slight variation of the Brotherhood recruits mechanic. You can trade in materials and send cargo carriages to different shops to make money. It's a nice way of including that element while shaking it up a little bit too. One nice new feature that I like is hunting and crafting. You can hunt certain animals by leaving out bait or just shooting them. Using the materials gathered from them, you can craft new weapons and armor. It's quite surface level in my opinion, but it's still very good. I think it adds yet another extra layer of thought to the game. That's going to be a key point I bring up with a lot of these games. The first Assassin's Creed laid a great foundation for a fun, assassin-y parkour gameplay game, and then each subsequent game tries new things to deepen the experience and make it more premium, more exciting. I think it's a good move. Hell, this game even introduced naval combat. Yeah, you have missions where you captain a ship and you shoot other ships. I mean, that is a big feature just to throw in for the sake of some side quests, really. But now we all know what that was essentially a tech demo for, and you know, we'll get into that game in a little bit. I love the open world. I love the environments you explore. I love the story so much. Bringing in historical elements like the Midnight Ride and the Boston Tea Party was a brilliant idea. I know the game got labelled as a glorified history lesson by some for trying to teach the player too much about history, but at the end of the day, if you're really that offended by the idea of learning something interesting, then are you really mature enough to be playing an 18-rated game? I'm not saying you need to care about history or even want to learn anything, and I appreciate that video games are meant to be an escape. But Assassin's Creed sets out to tell a compelling story, and I personally love when that compelling story crosses over with real historical events, and I may even come away knowing more about a given time period after finishing it. I learnt loads of American history when I first played this because it sparked my interest and I went out to go and learn more. I'm not saying it needed to with everyone, but it never sits you down and forces you to learn. At most, it'll spark intrigue, and if you can't cope with that, then you're silly. But when it comes to the history and historical figures in certain countries, I think we've seen a lot of Assassin's Creed fans failing to cope with anything in the last few months leading up to Shadows. I want to keep this video light, but fucking hell man. What's that guy called? Grums? Yeah. Cunt. Assassin's Creed 3 means a lot to me. I won't get into it too much now, and I'll do my regular personal feelings gush towards the end, but Assassin's Creed 3 is really special. And I always loved pretty much everything it did. In fact, I haven't actually said anything about the game that I don't like, because really there isn't anything. I truly adore Assassin's Creed 3. It tries a lot of new things, and like Brotherhood more so than Revelations, I think they all work brilliantly. But on top of that, it takes everything Brotherhood did, or most of what Brotherhood did, and either maintains it or advances it. Some elements may not be as good, like the trading system. I'll always prefer the way it was handled with the recruits in Brotherhood. But it's still good now, and it's a sensible evolution given the setting and the game itself. Some things in 3 are much better though. I'm not going to talk about the modern day story too much because I don't want to go too much into spoiler territory. I know it's a 13-year-old game, but I've spoken to numerous people who've said because of Shadows they're going to jump in and play Assassin's Creed for the first time, and if they do and they love it and they want to go back and play the rest of them, I don't really want to spoil the end of this game, and I also don't want them to not be able to watch my videos. All I will say, for those who've completed the game, I like it. I don't care. I know that's controversial, and subsequent game stories may have suffered because of it, but the modern day story in Assassin's Creed is great, and I think it's a fitting culmination of what led up to it. Anyway, if you hadn't guessed by now, and this is once again a possible hot take, but I'm giving Assassin's Creed 3 an S tier. I love this game so damn much. I could go on and on and on, but I'm at 5,000 words now in this script, and we've only just finished the 5th of 13 games. So yeah, let's move on to a title that I'm sure I won't have much to say about. Wow. S tier. Look, I love the damn series for a reason, and it's because a lot of the games in it are fucking amazing, okay? I can't pretend that Brotherhood 3 and Black Flag aren't basically perfect in my eyes, because they just are. My god, Assassin's Creed 4 is monumental, isn't it? Holy shit. I don't know where to begin. It's insane that Ubisoft came out of nowhere with this masterpiece of a pirate video game. It's very much a continuation of the Assassin's Creed series, and a very good one at that. But I just can't overlook the fact that they made what will probably always be the greatest pirate game of all time. And I'm saying this as someone who adores pirate games and has probably spent an entire percentage of my life playing Sid Meier's Pirates. It's just got the perfect blend of sword fighting, gameplay, naval exploration and combat, gorgeous locations and islands to explore, cities to muck around in, and goddamn sea shanties. It's no wonder Ubisoft are remaking this one. I mean, obviously weird that they didn't do the first game, but it makes sense that they'd do arguably the most popular one and the one that will always be in demand. Pirates are always trending. People love pirates in media. Anyway, this is an Assassin's Creed game, so let's talk about it in that context. I want to get the modern day story out of the way because it's quite self-contained, kind of, not fully. Again, to avoid spoilers for Assassin's Creed 3, I won't go into too many details, but offering up a first-person perspective in Abstergo, giving the player the option to find optional lore dumps on the other people's computers was so good. I personally really like the modern day element in this game. I know a lot of people don't like it, but I do, and you clicked on this video for someone's opinion, so yeah, that's what you're getting. Anyway, the narrative of the modern plot is quite fun. I like it when stories get creative with the format, and blending the modern day story with the historical story will always be like jangling keys in front of my eyes. I just love that kind of thing. Kind of related, but also unrelated, if you like Doctor Who and you're capable of reading, there is a book about Riversong written by her actor, and wow, it's brilliant. It plays with the format of the story so cleverly and translates the mind-bending world and concepts of Doctor Who so perfectly into book form. I'd argue it's about as creative as you can get with a written novel. Anyway, weird side tangent, but if you're into that kind of thing, if you're into creative storytelling, definitely give that a read. So yeah, ship combat is back and it's better than ever, as is the exploration. But let's be real here, you're not just doing a couple of missions on a boat in a straight line. Black Flag has a massive open world for you to sail around in, and you can seamlessly get off the boat and run around islands to collect chests, hunt animals, find all sorts of secrets, and check off the massive to-do list in the game. This is about where people started noticing Ubisoft's obsession with checklist open world activities. I think here it's fine. A big open world for a pirate to explore, you know, it kind of feels appropriate for a pirate to have a checklist of places to discover and treasure to find. That said, this game doesn't try to pretend it isn't primarily based around going here, doing this, going here, doing this, going here, doing that. And unfortunately, the first 3 hours of the game are hurt a lot by this. It opens wonderfully with a chase, then a fight on a luxurious island, but then the next few hours of the story feel like a slog because you just have tail missions. You tail this person, then follow them, then follow them, then tail them, then chase them, then follow them, then tail them. And it feels like it never really ends. It's so bizarre. The game is really fun, and there are some phenomenal missions later on, but for some reason, the game is quite slow to begin with. I mean, it's not the end of the world, because the characters, the narrative, and the environments more than make up for it. Either way, that's more or less my only gripe, to be honest. A lot of the features from 3 carry over here, you know, chasing paper on rooftops, managing cargo deliveries, meat shields, combat and parkour is pretty much the same. Crafting is a little bit more exciting, but fundamentally the same. One big new addition that I like, which comes with the ship stuff, are the forts and the epic ships you can fight. It makes sense to add some open world stuff to do on the boat, but I mean, God, I don't know, it's just really good. I'm glad they did it. Both of those elements are really fun, and I kind of wish there was more of it. Black Flag, but more of it. I wonder what that would be like. We'll get to that. Anyway, the cities are once again amazing, with brilliant levels for stealth and combat and parkour built into everywhere. I'm surprised they kept the cities so well made considering the time they must have spent on the open sea and ship stuff. But hey, they managed it. Really though, the highlight is exploring the various islands and environments, swimming underwater to explore sunken ships, and just being a pirate through and through. The game even has Abstergo challenges, much like the guild challenges from Brotherhood and Revelations. These offer cool rewards like turning enemies into rabbits. It's fun and it's stupid, and it's just these kind of things that add yet another layer of depth and fun to be had in the game. Again, you can more or less breeze through the game's story if you want, but there's so much more to enjoy if you choose to. Oh, also boarding and sinking ships is so goddamn fun. I love this game a lot. The story of Black Flag in my eyes is pretty good. It's compelling enough, and interacting with the various real-life famous pirates was a ton of fun, and even made for some really heartfelt and hard-hitting moments. Black Flag is the full package. It has everything you could ever want from a pirate video game, everything you could ever want from an Assassin's Creed game, and quite frankly, anything you could ever want from a video game in general. Like Brotherhood, and Revelations and 3, come to think of it. There was a multiplayer component. It's very similar to before, so I didn't really mention it again until now, but this is the last time we'd see multiplayer like this. I just wanted to highlight how nuts it is that they pulled off a game this good and this big and still managed to include a multiplayer element. So yeah, Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag once again is basically a perfect video game in my opinion. So it gets S tier. What order will these S tier games be in at the end? Who knows? Will there be any more perfect games, or is that it for now? Only time will tell. Oh, I see the issue now.
Assassin's Creed Rogue was the rushed-out Xbox 360 and PS3 game to accompany the next-gen exclusive Assassin's Creed Unity. This one, as a result of being developed in something crazy like 10 months, was quite derivative of Black Flag. Now to start with, I just want to highlight some good things. I like the idea of us finally playing as a Templar, and instead of giving us just the opposing perspective of a story we already played, Rogue toys around with morals and asks some fairly serious questions about the Assassin Order. It justifies the individual motives of certain Templars a lot more. It also takes place between 3 and 4, so we get a nice amount of missing lore filled in regarding Achilles, Connor's mentor, Haytham Kenway, and Adewale, Edward's first mate. It's a fun story, and I'm impressed that they cooked this up so quickly given that it was never part of the plan. The modern day story too is a bit derivative of Black Flag, but fun nonetheless. There are a lot more lore dumps to find in the computers, exactly the same as Black Flag. I'd argue these are far more interesting, and I'm desperate to actually see a lot of the stuff hinted at with Subject Zero. On top of that, the new locations are fun, and it's cool seeing New York again from a different perspective. The icy gameplay with the ships is fun, it just adds something new, And now Shay can also shoot some darts to make people sleep or go berserk. There are surely some nice additions to this game that make it worth checking out. However, it's quite short, at least the narrative. It's only 6 sequences, which is fine. If it's good, that's what counts. But it doesn't really do anything that we hadn't seen before in Black Flag. In fact, it is just Black Flag but more, and I don't think that's a good thing, really. The open world is huge and full of stuff to do, stuff to tick off a checklist. But the problem is, it's becoming too much. Way too much. There is a seemingly never-ending supply of islands to visit, outposts to raid, and things to collect. Don't get me wrong, like Assassin's Creed 1, the fundamental gameplay is good enough that this is still fun, but it is just too much. It lacks variety in the way the other games had, and I feel like it lacks direction. Each building in the previous game felt like it was placed to be part of a specific parkour route. With Rogue, it's just beginning to feel like they throw things wherever they want and hope it lands. Which, look, it's not bad, it's just not new and exciting, and it never warrants being so big. I'd rather just have the more streamlined story that we got, and maybe 1 or 2 cool new things to focus on that were properly fleshed out, rather than spending all that time making the huge open world that we'd seen and done before. It was a rushed game, and it's impressive that they made it in that time, but in the same breath, it is still a fully fledged entry in the series, so it needs to be discussed as such. And it falls flat in a lot of ways, in my opinion. I like it, and I enjoyed it at the time when it came out, but I was also 14, and I'm not 14 anymore. I can appreciate as well that maybe this was the beginning of the slop era for Ubisoft. This year we got Far Cry 4, which in my eyes was a sign that Ubisoft were about to lose it. Again, I like Far Cry 4 for the record, but with that and Rogue, it became clear that this company was about to milk the same formula for each franchise they owned over and over and over again. So yeah, I like Rogue. There's not a ton else to say about it. I genuinely do enjoy it because it's Black Flag Volume 2, but being Black Flag Volume 2 means it just doesn't really warrant existing in the way it does or being as big as it is, so I'm giving it C tier. I think that's appropriate.
Okay, this is where things get weird. I don't think you need telling, but in case you don't remember, as this was 11 years ago, Assassin's Creed Unity's launch was a disaster. It launched on consoles that just couldn't cope with the scope of the game, and despite an enormous development time, it came out riddled with bugs. Some were just funny visual glitches, but a lot were fundamental problems. Unity quickly became synonymous with games that were rushed, poorly thought out, or just launched badly. It's sad because the build-up to Unity was amazing. Everyone was excited, this was after Black Flag. The CGI trailer with that Lorde song was one of the best ever. People were ready for this. It was a bold move to drop a next-gen exclusive game so quickly, but everything we'd seen up to that point was proving that it was going to deliver. The game promised co-op gameplay with large missions designed to be completed with up to 4 players. But it was a catastrophic failure at launch, so bad that the main DLC was given out for free and Season Pass holders were given an entire spin-off game for free in the form of Chronicles China. However, the unfortunate launch aside, was Unity actually good behind all of that? You see, now the game has been patched and fixed enough that it's playable, more or less, in the way that it was intended, especially now with next-gen consoles. The PS4 port runs well enough on PS5 and the Xbox One port runs exceptionally well on the Series X. Well, in my opinion, it was fine. It was always going to be fine, not excellent. I know since it got fixed and some arguably worse games came out, Unity has received a much needed reevaluation, but personally I think everyone was still a little too nice to it. I don't mean that in a bad way, I just personally think that yes, it's a good enough experience now, it's playable, but it's still at its core not the best Assassin's Creed game out there. In fact, it does a lot that I still don't like. But first, let's get into the good.
Paris is unbelievable. I adore Paris in this game. They did a phenomenal job making such a living, breathing open world. Going for a smaller scale city after such big open sea games was a good idea. They were able to do a great job paying attention to the little details and making Paris the best it could be, even down to the incredible day cycles the NPCs have. It's a phenomenal game world. Doubling down on that, have you seen the damn thing? Why don't more games use baked-in lighting, honestly? Unity stands out a bit because it doesn't have a day-night cycle. They used baked-in lighting to achieve the best-looking Assassin's Creed game without using too much processing power, so they could use that on large seamless worlds and hordes of people. It was still too much, unfortunately, but I respect the decision. Baked-in lighting is something most games should use. You don't need a day-night cycle, and I'd much rather have clean, well-designed lighting than dynamic lighting for absolutely no reason, you know? But yeah, and until Shadows comes out, which is, you know, in a matter of hours, I can safely say Unity is the best looking game in the series, and it's not even vaguely close. Well, it's a little bit close, but it's the best one. Truly a remarkable achievement, making it look so good and making it run at all, let alone well after a few months. To top off the amazingly designed world, Ubisoft opted to revamp the parkour. Again, oh my god, this is where the game shines in my opinion. The parkour in Unity is something else. Having a button to actually parkour down was a great move, and something I think everyone was a little shocked by. Not because it was a strange idea, but because it was so obvious and no one had realised it until then. Players and developers alike should have noticed that this was missing, like, from the first game, and I don't know why we all didn't. We all just missed it. Either way, it never stops being fun to run around Paris, climb on the rooftops, run through buildings, chase enemies through crowds of people, just everything is fun. It's a really well designed world with a great movement system to complement it, much like the first Assassin's Creed game. But, and I hate to do this, Unity's issues are a little more obvious than those of Assassin's Creed 1 and Assassin's Creed 2, and unfortunately, a lot more damaging. You see, with the parkour revamp also came a combat revamp, and sadly, it's awful. I know a lot of people like it, and, you know, fair enough, I'm glad people do, because it'd be a shame if no one did, but for me, it just doesn't work. In theory, there's more focus on landing hits, deflecting and dodging. It's not as easy to counter-kill someone instantly, and yeah, I mean, I agree in theory that is a lot better. It's more engaging, but I'd rather have a low ambition feature done well than a high ambition feature done badly. What I'm saying is, I like the idea, but I feel like they didn't do it very well, and the combat just always fell flat for me. I found myself avoiding as many battles as I could, not because I wanted to be stealthy, but because I just wasn't having fun whenever a fight broke out. Sadly, that really shouldn't be the case. Every part of the game should be fun. However, a lot of people do like it, and having different opinions is fine. I just can't lie about my own opinions here. That would be silly, since this is an opinion video. Anyway, combat aside, let's talk weapons. I like the variety, I like the details. I like that you kind of have to level up in an RPG way to be able to wear certain items and use certain weapons. It's clear that the RPG influence started here. Black Flag tried bits where you were recommended against missions if your boat wasn't good enough, but Unity properly introduced the idea of leveling up and the other RPG elements like that. I don't hate it, actually. I don't love what it then became, but I think it works in this single setting. The story is dull as shit. I'm sorry, it's tedious. Arno isn't Ezio, and I think it was baffling that Ubisoft had such success breaking away from Ezio and creating new and interesting assassins, only to go right back to chasing the charming warrior trope they already focused 3 games on. Arno is fine, but nothing more than a one-note version of something we've seen before. He's performed well, but his story, his journey, the whole narrative, it's really forgettable. Which is sad, because the time period this game is set in is wonderful and could have been a great vessel for all kinds of wonderful stories, but they didn't find one. Let's say you want to ignore the story of the past. What about the modern plot? Oh good, yeah, there isn't one. Okay, so you want to run around and do some side activities. Yeah, holy shit. This, forget Rogue, this is where Ubisoft lost it. I know, they came out the same day. This, Far Cry 4, Rogue and Watch Dogs were all in 2014, and they were the biggest red flags we didn't make enough of a fuss about at the time, and we already did make a fair bit of fuss. For the record, these are all games I really like, and I'll defend the first Watch Dogs to the end of days. But holy shit, the icons on this map are shocking. There are so many chests or Paris stories or other chests that you have to link your phone to with an app or fragments to collect. It was nuts. There was just way too much to do and the world map is far too bloated. It's sad because running around and collecting chests or completing small scale Paris stories is a lot of fun, but it's just too daunting to even begin. The abundance of icons on maps and checklist activities plagued a lot of games around this time, and Ubisoft in 2014 was the biggest offender of that. This is where the series started to get the same complaints from everyone. You know, same game every year, nothing new, bloated maps, collectathon, and to be fair, they did listen. They finished off the game they were nearly done with after this, and then they took a break to reinvent the series. But we will talk about that in a little bit. I think Unity was a little like Revelations, where it had a lot of ideas and threw them all in with very little care as to whether they would actually work, and I feel more things in this didn't work. That's not to say there wasn't a lot of good here. The assassination missions, where you have 3 or 4 ways into a building, are great. There are some really exciting, really tense scenarios with more player choice than ever, and I think this is where the series should have been going. That was actually a really good part of Unity. The other really good part of Unity was the co-op. I can't really remember if people liked this at the time or not, but for me it was really good. I don't normally like multiplayer games anyway, but this worked well. Big missions, more enemies, more tasks, harder objectives, more players to do them. There's not a ton else to say about them. They were doable alone, and after finishing the main game, the hardest ones were not really that tough to do alone, but with other players it was cool and obviously a lot easier. I like it. I'm glad it didn't come back though. It wasn't needed, and it definitely took a lot of the development focus away from the main game, which, as we know, could have done with quite a lot more work. Anyway, that's about it for Unity. I like it, but I really, I like almost all of them. I think this has a lot going for it, with some of the best graphics you'll ever see, wonderful parkour, and a brilliant city to explore, but its shortcomings are just so prevalent and bring the game down massively. I don't know if Unity could ever have reached the heights of the previous games, simply because of the concept and the scope of the game alone. Anyway, I'm giving it a C tier, same as Rogue. I think these 2 games were poor offerings compared to the rest of the series, but still good enough games in their own right. I don't revisit them often, but when I do, I still enjoy myself. Though I do find myself thinking, yeah, this would be more fun if it was Brotherhood or Black Flag. But yeah, C tier. Okay, I promised myself I would try and keep some of these quite short because I don't want this video to waste people's time, but hey ho, Unity's entry has the most words in my script of any of them so far, so we will see. Anyway, I don't have a lot to say on Syndicate. Boiling it down to one simple sentence, I don't like Assassin's Creed Syndicate, but I wanted to love it. Getting the good out of the way right off the bat, London fucks, I love it. Like Paris, London is so well designed and feels alive. Maybe not as good as Paris, but both are excellent open worlds. Liberating sections of London was a fun way of tying together the open world activities and giving them purpose. I actually wish they went a little harder with this stuff. Riding horses and shit was cool. I like the ability to swap protagonists as well. Evie and Jacob each having different playstyles, Evie being more stealthy and worse in combat, Jacob being less stealthy but better in combat. It's a cool idea, and I'm really excited to see how this works 10 years later with Shadows. Playing certain missions as a specific character but being given the option for most was nice too, rather than each mission being locked to one character and only having the choice in open world activities, which I was worried would be the case when the game launched. I also like the train. It's the base area, but it's just a train. And the side quests in this game are structured really well. I love that you have different characters whose journeys you can kind of join them on and do quests for them. Especially because once again there are a handful of historical figures. I love that. Dickens, Queen Lizzie, Marksy Marks. Yeah, great additions to the game. Anyway, I said I'd be quick. That was the good. Unfortunately, that was all of the good. Now for the bad. I don't like Jacob, but I do like Evie. She's still not much of a character though. Both are glorified caricatures of more interesting characters. The story is beyond forgettable, and at the time I remember thinking to myself that it was difficult to care about, and clearly that was true because I didn't care and now I don't remember any of it. The parkour is toned down for some reason. They had it perfect with Unity, but for some reason they dumbed it down a bit. Either way, it doesn't matter because the rope zipline dart thing can carry you right up a building, rendering parkour completely useless in this game. What a stupid fucking decision that was. It genuinely didn't feel like Assassin's Creed most of the time. You know how I said I like the different playstyles of the 2 protagonists? Yeah. Would have liked it a lot more if the combat wasn't awful for both of them. Worse than Unity, genuinely. I can't even properly describe it, but it just fucking sucks. I don't know why, but the hits never feel like they land. It feels floaty and gross, and like you're not even battling anyone half the time. It is piss poor. It's really bad compared to everything that came before. I can accept parkour being a little undercooked simply because the game doesn't want you to use it, which is an issue in its own right, but the combat being this crap is utterly bizarre. It might sound like I'm being harsh, and if it does, go back and play Syndicate, you'll know what I mean. Realistically though, I'm so pressed about this because Syndicate should have been an amazing game. It should have been one of the best. London during the Industrial Revolution is such a great setting. 2 protagonists was a great idea. You have some of the most interesting historical figures to bring in, which they did, to give them their dues. You have all the knowledge you gained from Unity's failed launch. How was Syndicate this dull? It's not even like it's an awful game. I'd go as far as to say I don't really like it, but I still enjoy playing it sometimes. It's just that it could have and should have been so incredible, and it was just there, They toned down the abundance of icons on the map, but even then 100%ing it was a slog, and at times it felt like a complete waste of time. I don't know, I want to love Syndicate, and I think the fact that I don't makes me more upset about it than I reasonably should be, if that makes sense. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I prefer Unity, and believe me, at the time when I first played these two, that was not the opinion I had. My tastes have changed, and I've gone back to each game numerous times as a grown man, and Syndicate just missed the mark profoundly to me. This is a slight side note, but the marketing made it look so good. I mean, of course it has to. But Jacob was a completely different character in those trailers. Like, they changed Edward Kenway's hair before release in Black Flag, that's fine. But Jacob was a different man. Why did he suddenly become the goofball comic relief character in what feels like the goofball comic relief game? It's a strange one. Anyway, D tier for this. Not a great game, one of the weaker entries. Following the disaster that was Unity and the middling reviews that Syndicate got, at least in the context of Assassin's Creed reviews, Ubisoft knew they needed to do something. They took a year off and in that time released a handful of spin-offs, remasters and a movie, so we didn't forget this megalodon of a franchise existed. Don't worry guys, we wouldn't have forgotten. In 2017 they came back with Assassin's Creed Origins, a loaded name, suggesting the game would explore the origins of the Assassin Order, which it did, and potentially hinting at a return to the glory of the original few games. It's quite different, it didn't do that. Origins is an RPG, it is huge, you have a large amount of Egypt to explore, a brand new parkour system, a brand new combat system, a new structure for the whole game in terms of ticking off checklist activities and side quests. Assassin's Creed Origins reinvented the series, and it is one of the best games I've ever played in my entire life. I cannot describe to you what it was like the first time playing the game from start to finish, achieving 100% and then having expansions released shortly after. It was one of the best times I ever had. In general, in my gaming life. Origins is a perfect example of how you reinvent a series with a modern twist. It had been 10 years since the first game, and they needed to change things up. It won't be a surprise to anyone, but it took a lot of inspiration from The Witcher 3, and that's fine, The Witcher 3 is a good game. One of the best, you might say. I can't talk on that matter, as I've not actually properly played it yet, but I can see the influence of that game on modern AC games for sure. The combat moves away from the counter-killing and chaining kills, and now is more hitbox focused, and I like that. Bayek of Siwa is a warrior, and with a plethora of weapons at his disposal, he's capable of doing some horrible things to people in a lot of ways. Basically, the RPG elements mean you can play in any way you want. I like quick weapons that do little damage but quickly, and I gotta do this a lot in that game. You can also get a bow and arrow with different arrow types, including one you can control once you've shot it. Very fun. Enemies are leveled so that once you level up they become easier, and they also scale up to your level if you want them to. This is an RPG through and through. The skill tree is big and full of both big and small perks. Full abilities on offer or just small single percentage increases in stats. Origins goes hard on providing a new experience within the series, and I love it for that. It doesn't feel like a game I've played before, yet it's still clearly part of the franchise I know and love. Viewpoints are back, but don't clear the map like they used to, so that big complaint people had about radio towers and whatnot doesn't matter so much here. They serve more as optional collectibles that reward you, in a way. There are also pyramids you can climb and go inside. You'd have to be insane to not think that's cool. So yeah, I've not gone into this yet. It's Egypt, it's stunning. Bayek is a phenomenal lead, performed to perfection, the best performance we've ever had in the series actually in my opinion. The narrative is fantastic, a strong story of vengeance, faith and discovery. Bayek leading the creation of the Assassin Order with his wife Aya was so amazing to see, and a wonderful prequel to the series. On top of that, we got a modern day story again. It's not a lot, but it's something, more than Unity and Syndicate, that's for sure. Anyway, I love Origins and everything it does. It really takes a Brotherhood approach by throwing a ton of new stuff at the wall, but making sure to scrape off the crap that didn't work. Every single part of this game slaps, from the large bases that need taking down, to the legendary creatures that need battling, to the surprisingly good skill tree. Cosmetics, weapons, combat, cities, pyramids, large desert areas. I love this fucking game so much. And I just want to acknowledge that Bayek has, far and away, the best assassin robes out of any of them. Now this is a costume, holy shit. Origins is big. It took me around 75 hours to 100% the game. I'm typically fairly quick, but I felt like I took my time a lot with this one. I mean, there's another one that took me nearly double the time, so we'll get to that one. I love every second of the story, I love every side quest, every optional activity, I love discovering all the secrets the game has to offer, exploring every area. Hell, this game even introduced photo mode, which I spent way too long in. I made some killer shots though, and I'm proud of a lot of my compositions. My only real gripe with this game is the parkour. It's been updated and now it's easier than ever, but there's no real need to actually think about where you're climbing, as Bayek seems to be able to climb on pretty much anything. I don't know, I don't like that.
It kind of ruins the fun of the parkour system. If you don't have to think about where you're going, where's the challenge? What makes it a game? Parkouring is still functional, just not as good as it could be. Anyway, yeah, the combat is well designed and it feels great to play, it's responsive and deep enough that it never gets boring, the enemies are great to battle with a good amount of variety, it's just a brilliant RPG that plays wonderfully from the very first moment. The game introduced microtransactions and time savers, such as buying icons for the map. A lot of additional costumes got created for this game and sold for £5 or £6 in the store. It's not the worst thing in the world in this game. It's not a ton, it's there, but it's not loads of stuff that's being restricted, but it is a scary sign of what's coming. For now, I have to say I love Origins and I think it's a phenomenal video game. Almost every choice made here was the correct one, nay, the best possible one. I can't in good faith sit here and give the game anything less than S tier, but you already knew that was coming. This is the last S tier game for the record. I think there are 4 perfect games in this series. I'm telling you this now because if you've played the next 3, you'll know there's no chance they're going to be S tier. Oh boy. Okay, Assassin's Creed Odyssey is to Origins what Rogue was to Black Flag. At its core, it's just Origins but more. I mean, that is a tad unfair because Origins has a lot going for it, but it really takes what Origins did, and it just does it to an extreme degree. Map size, double it. Skill tree, make it crazy big. Abilities, make too many. Hideouts to raid, up the collectibles. Story length, increase it. Odyssey feels like Origins if you didn't cut back at all, and I don't hate it for that. Odyssey is a great Spartan simulator with some amazing character moments and action set pieces throughout. A lot of cool gimmicks were added to this game, but a lot of tedious content was also jammed in. Ship stuff is back, but a lot more surface level than Black Flag, which is fine, it didn't need to be huge, it's barely even a real feature in this game. One key thing about Odyssey is that you have 2 protagonists again, only this time you choose one at the start of the game and you stay playing as them the entire time. The other one then plays a different role in the narrative. The correct choice is Cassandra because she's the canon character and had the better actor, but it really doesn't make a difference. Beyond some great cutscenes and golden moments here and there, Odyssey's story is very lackluster. I think Unity level here, it's forgettable and not even really about assassins or Templars, and all around just crap in my opinion. It takes the Origins approach of picking off targets one by one by gaining info about them and unlocking their identities, but it all feels like it's for nothing. There are dialogue choices with absolutely no stakes whatsoever. Sure, you can get a couple of different endings, but really that just boils down to a single shot of people sitting at a table, and depending on who you kill, there might be fewer guests at the table. I don't have a lot to say on Odyssey really, which is good because this video is getting crazy long and I have got a matter of hours to edit this audio and upload the video. I'm recording this at 2:45 PM and I plan on uploading this at 8 PM, so we will see. Same day. I'm uploading the same day. Christ, this is a terrible idea, but I've committed to it now. It's kind of a non-Assassin's Creed game to me. I mean, it clearly did start life as a Spartan game, and Ubisoft knew that changing gears near the end of development and slapping the AC name on it would sell more, but technically that does make it an Assassin's Creed game. It's just sort of there, like it's not offensively bad, and it is fun throughout, like the entire time. But it does play exactly like Origins, doing very little new in that department. It just throws so much more content at you in a slightly less interesting way. It's forgettable, and that's a shame. There was probably a much more exciting game to be made with this premise, but sadly it falls short in my eyes and devolves quickly back to the rinse and repeat formula the series had become known for. I still enjoy the game and I prefer playing it to a lot of the other entries here, but it's really not as excellent as it could have been. I'm giving it a B tier. Okay, here we go. Assassin's Creed Valhalla comes at us following another year's break. Post-COVID, we had this to look forward to. It's a game that promised to be to Vikings what Black Flag was to pirates, the quintessential Viking game, if you will. There was a lot of hype around it. It sold unfathomably well, but was it good? Oh fuck no, it wasn't. I have great memories of my time playing this game. I met my partner just before this came out, and my fond memories of this game are it being paused while I replied to her messages. My mood would then sink when I unpaused the game. We're still together, despite my earliest memories of her being tainted by Valhalla. Now, I'm being harsh, it's not that bad. It's a continuation of what Odyssey was doing. It's bigger, it's grander, it's sloppier. The fucking skill tree is genuinely scary to look at. It's too much.
Eivor, who this time can be a man or a woman, but is the same character either way, is actually a non-character. Completely pointless story with absolutely no drive to continue whatsoever, and a batch of profoundly uninteresting characters and dialogue choices that amount to nothing. The combat's pretty good, in fact the combat's great. I love going around chopping people up in this game, and the variety of weapons, abilities and enemies make combat infinitely fun. Genuinely, it is probably the best combat in any Assassin's Creed game yet, and the fact that Shadows looks like a ninja version of that, I'm very excited. England and Norway are also great locations, and it's quite fun seeing whatever the fuck Ubisoft think the UK's map looks like. But the core of the game has you liberating every single county they could be bothered to remember, and holy shit does it get stale after about a third of the way through. I didn't want to finish it. I did, obviously, and I don't regret it, but I really wanted the game to end by the time it finished. I mean, obviously that's kind of how it works, but I wanted it to end long before that. I clocked up 125 hours in 100%ing it, which is a long time, but not as long as some games could be. But my complaint isn't that it's a long game, it's that it had the capability to be so draining and dull from about halfway in. Brotherhood would never outstay its welcome because it was always engaging, trying new things and giving the player value for their actions. Even if it ended up being 200 hours, I'm sure Brotherhood would have kept it interesting. Doing a side quest in the earlier games felt worth it. In this, it's just because the quest log is so full that you need to do it to work out where the main quests even are. I like the base, I like that you slowly build it out, I like the customization with hair, beards, tattoos and clothes. The weapons are cool, some of the raiding gameplay is good, but again that's predominantly combat. I like the parkour challenges, but that's about it. I know I actually listed quite a lot of good things there, but they're tainted so heavily by a lot of bad. It's like wrapping up a sausage roll in shit. Like, I mean, at its core, it's still a sausage roll, but it's just been tainted, and it's bad. You don't want to eat that sausage roll. I mean, maybe give it a good wash first, at least. I really wanted to like Valhalla, but with the painfully dull story, the lazily animated and acted cutscenes, the repetitive go here then go here mission structure, the overloading of collectibles, side quests, and trawling across the map meant that these moments of goodness were hidden behind such a slog of a game that I look back on it and I just feel sad. It could have been so good, and dare I say it had the DNA of a good game in there. I maintain it's still really fun to jump back in and chop some people up, but since I stopped playing in 2020, they've added about 10,000 quests and £100,000 worth of microtransactions hiding all the cool weapons and gear. If you think you're getting the full game experience with the base game, you are wrong. Completely, utterly wrong. All the best gear is hidden behind a microtransaction, or a rotating shop you must complete quests to get currency for because for some fucking reason Valhalla is a live service game. The game displays such a surface level understanding of what makes Assassin's Creed good. Coming up with a new idea for a collectible and shoving 300 on the map is not good inherently. That's not what made the feathers fun to collect. It just feels like the driving force behind Valhalla didn't understand the series it was working on. Which is weird because it was written by the Revelations writer and directed by the Origins director before he used his status in the company to sexually intimidate women in the office. Christ, that company. I don't know how else to express my feelings without just saying, I don't like it. But it just feels like someone played and enjoyed Origins, then made another version of it without fully understanding why it was good in the first place. It's sad. Valhalla had a lot of potential. And like Syndicate, a lot of why I'm upset is because it didn't meet that potential. I'm putting it in D tier. On a fundamental level, I don't like Valhalla, but I can't deny it has fun moments. Raiding villages and battling hordes of enemies or even Norse gods was fun. It's just held down by so many poor decisions. So, we're about to talk about Mirage, the latest entry in the series, as of today, which is the final day before Shadows. Since you're here now at the end, I have to assume you both care about Assassin's Creed and somewhat enjoyed this video, and I just want to express how amazing the series is to me. The reason I got an Xbox 360 back in the day was to play Assassin's Creed. Well, actually the first few by that point. I'd seen it at other people's houses and I loved it. I knew I had to play this, so by the time I finally did, I had high expectations, and that first game still blew my mind. Over the following 6 months, I zoomed through the rest up to that point, which was the build up to Assassin's Creed 4 in the timeline of events, and I just loved every second of what I was playing. I had no idea games could have such amazing stories, could be so stunning, and could have such incredible music. I used to pretend I was an assassin and climb things at school or in the garden. Every time I heard, and this still rings true now, the tune of Ezio's Family, I get goosebumps. The visuals, the music, the gameplay. Assassin's Creed is just that golden series for me. Just the be-all and end-all.
I know my channel is predominantly Rayman focused at the moment, and believe me, Rayman had an even bigger impact on me, but I just can't express enough how important Assassin's Creed was to me growing up as a teenager. It's where I first got the desire to tell complicated stories that get creative with the format. It's when I first decided I wanted to make games and work for Ubisoft. Maybe that second part has faded, but hey, I started making a game in March, so clearly the drive to create something stayed around. I just truly adore the stories, the characters and the worlds of Assassin's Creed. I have such fond memories of abusing my mother with information about the series until she started to get into it, and we, together, completed all the optional Abstergo lore stuff in Rogue and listened to all the recordings of Subject Zero. It's such a rich universe of stories in a series of games that, even in their lowest points, are still fun to play. They're still a joy to engage in and complete. Hell, I'm a completionist. I like to 100% every game I play. I have a proud collection of PlayStation Platinum trophies and a modest 120,000 gamer score on Xbox. That all started with Assassin's Creed. I think it's safe to say that Assassin's Creed changed my life as a teenager and has shaped a lot of who I am now. My tastes, my ambitions, I owe a lot to Assassin's Creed. Even as a 24-year-old, I am absolutely giddy about Assassin's Creed Shadows. I've taken some time off work to play it this week once it comes out. Assassin's Creed has persevered in my life for well over 10 years now, and I'm so thankful for all the creative minds behind the series and anyone who's ever worked on them. I may not love them all, but I do not regret a single second I've spent playing any of the games in this tremendous series. So if you're watching this and you've worked on Assassin's Creed, thank you so much. Now, on to the final entry as of today. Assassin's Creed Mirage is such a step in the right direction in my opinion. Following the unfortunate case of Valhalla, 3 years later, which is the longest gap there's ever been in the series, we got a game very reminiscent of the earlier titles. In fact, Mirage feels very at home around the Unity Syndicate time, not necessarily in quality, but in vibe. You know, it's a smaller scale adventure in one main city, a bigger focus on combat, stealth assassinations, a fun narrative with twists and great set pieces. I really like Mirage. It has some shortcomings, sure. I don't think it ever really fully committed to being the game it set out to be. I also don't love Basim, but I'll be honest, I did like him as a protagonist a lot more than I expected to when this was first revealed. It gives a lot more context as to why he was the way he was in Valhalla, which was nice, it was helpful. I don't know, the parkour was fun and it involves more thought finally, the combat is better. It's like if Unity's combat was done successfully. It kind of feels like Mirage is the game that Unity wanted to be. The city of Baghdad is beautiful, with some amazing landmarks and regions to explore. There's a hell of a lot to love in this game. I enjoy the collectibles here too. There aren't too many, and they almost all lead to some kind of larger goal that rewards the player with something. The side missions are fun, there aren't too many of them, but they all feel well worth your time. The stealth is kind of weird. It's there, but it's not fleshed out enough. Like I said, it doesn't really commit to being the game it wanted to be quite enough. I wish microtransactions didn't exist in this game at all. You know, I wish it had just been a complete experience. But they're cut down so much from the previous titles that it's not as big of an issue. In terms of story, I really like it. It's kind of self-contained, like it relates a bit to the overarching story of Valhalla and the modern plot, but it also focuses nicely on Basim and his relationship with the Assassin Order. It feels smaller in scale than usual, and it's what I think the series needed. It's a game much more akin to the earlier titles, something we'd all been asking for a long time. Even if it's the last time that happens, I'm just so happy to see a modern interpretation of that original formula, with the latest innovations of the series integrated into it. Assassin's Creed Mirage is an excellent game, and a wonderful addition to the Assassin's Creed series. As a fan for a long time, I felt really pleased and satisfied, so I'm giving it A tier. That's every Assassin's Creed game, at least the main ones, on a tier list. Now it's time to rank them all from worst to best, starting at the bottom. Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Assassin's Creed Syndicate, Assassin's Creed Rogue, Assassin's Creed Unity, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Assassin's Creed 2, Assassin's Creed 1, Assassin's Creed Mirage, Assassin's Creed Revelations, Assassin's Creed Origins, Assassin's Creed 3, Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, and the best game in the franchise in my opinion, one of the greatest games ever made, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. I love this series so much, and this was really hard to rank, which is why I think I ended up writing 13,000 words for this video. I think it was the only way to properly think about it and gather my feelings. Anyway, what do you think of my list? How would you rate them and rank them? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to know what you all think about this amazing series. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay awesome, stay ready for Assassin's Creed Shadows, and I'll see you in the next one, through your webcam.